Hello everyone, we're in Dolphin Song. It's Lawrence and John. It's the holiday readings with me, Mr. Kerbal. I'm just having fun reading along with you, and I hope that you're enjoying your holidays, doing some reading. And it's great to have you with me. So, chapter 18. Claudius lay unconscious on the sand, so colourless and lifeless in the glow of the torch that if it weren't for the red wheels on his belly, he would have blended into it. His face, lips and neck were swollen. His breathing was shallow and laboured. A short distance away from him was the Portuguese man-of-war responsible for his condition. Its top a clear, gas-filled bubble, its tentacles trailing like purple-blue spaghetti almost the width of the beach. It looked too pretty to be dangerous. Jake was pacing up and down, periodically squatting beside his comatose friend, saying, "Claudius, mate, you stay with us, you hear?" Sherilyn was even more of a mess than Lucy. She was sitting on the sand in her crumpled pink pajamas, wringing her hands. "We're going to die here," she said plaintively. "I'll never see my mum and dad again. This island is going to kill us, and all they'll find is our bones." The only person doing anything constructive was Nathan, who was going back and forth to the ocean's edge like an automaton, filling a gourd with seawater and trickling it over the wheels on Claudius' stomach in an attempt to soothe the inflammation. Martine remembered her dad telling her that vinegar or urine were the best treatments for jellyfish stings. But the man-o'-war was a different species and had a reputation as one of the most venomous creatures in the sea. "We thought because your dad was a doctor you might know some first aid or something," Lucy said in the same small voice to Martine. "We've tried everything." Shamefaced, she handed over the survival kit. "We even tried pouring some of the stuff you had in bottles over the red patches. But nothing worked." Martine could have wept. Grace's lovingly made potions had been wasted in the sand. The fishing hook and line was missing. Other items were covered in grit. She zipped it up so she didn't have to look at it and knelt beside Claudius. As they'd run over, she'd felt many conflicting emotions about her tormentor, few of them good. She'd been quite sure that he was being a hypochondriac, that they'd get all the way across the island to find him faking some medical drama just so he could be the centre of attention. But those feelings and doubts left her as soon as she saw him. It was obvious he was critically ill. He was straining so hard to breathe that the veins were practically popping from his neck, and his pulse was so weak that Martine had difficulty finding it. She tilted his head back to ensure his airways were clear and stood up. "There's nothing I can do," she said. "There's nothing any of us can do. He's had a severe allergic reaction to the sting. I think he's gone into anaphylactic shock. Unless he gets to a hospital fast, he'll probably die." Lucy went almost as pale as Claudius. Nathan threw his gourd into the sea and Jake swore softly. Sherilyn burst into tears again. Ben said, "You can help him." 5 mouths dropped open. Martine's, because she was so stunned to hear Ben break his silence in front of their classmates and the others, because in the entire 3.5 years they'd known him, he'd never uttered a syllable. "What did you say?" Lucy said incredulously. "I knew it," Jake cried. "I knew you could talk. I knew it was an act." "Shut up, Jake," snapped Lucy. "Claudius is about to die, and all you can think about is yourself." "Ben, what do you mean about Martine helping him?" "Martine, if you know a way to save him, do it. I know he's given you a lot of grief. We all have. I'm sorry about the lighthouse. I feel really bad about your survival kit, but can't you forget about that for now? If you help Claudius, we'll make it up to you, I promise." "It's not that," Martine told her. "None of that matters now. Claudius needs treatment only a hospital can give him. He needs allergy medication or some antidote to the man-o'-war venom, and if his heart stops, he's going to need to be resuscitated to get it going again." "What about that black magic thing you do?" Jake demanded. "What about that thing you did with the goose at the botanical gardens in Kirstenbosch?" Martine looked at him. She'd once healed an Egyptian goose with a broken wing during a school visit to the botanical gardens in Cape Town. But it was not a happy memory. Just a side note, I've been to Kirstenbosch. It's the most beautiful place. It's just incredible. It's like Kew Gardens, but different, obviously, because the whole landscape is different in Cape Town. But it's just the most amazing mountains, and sometimes they do open-air concerts in Kirstenbosch. It's just fantastic. Sorry about that, just that triggered a memory. The part with the goose was, but afterwards the group of kids who'd witnessed the healing, of whom Jake was one, had chased her with sticks, chanting, "Witch, witch, witch." She snapped back to the present. "I don't do black magic," she told Jake. "It's the opposite of black magic. Sometimes I help animals a little, that's all. I can't help people." "Yes, you can," Ben repeated. "You can help him." There was such conviction in the way he said it that Martine, conscious of what Ben had done for her that afternoon, knelt down beside Claudius without another word and laid her hands on him. Almost immediately her palms began to heat up, just as they had done with the goose and the dolphin, and she could feel a powerful energy flowing through her. But there was a problem. The energy went as far as Claudius's skin and then stopped, as if blocked by an impenetrable barrier. Martine concentrated harder, but there was no improvement in Claudius's condition. If anything, he grew even paler and his breathing became more ragged. That's when she knew for certain that her healing gift was for animals and not for people. So she thought about Grace instead and the wisdom of the grandmothers through the ages, trying to fathom what they would do if they were her. She remembered the night that Grace had come to her in the memory room in the caves at Salbona and had given her a crash course in traditional medicine. Was there anything she had learned then that would help? Grace had spoken a lot about toxins and venoms, but there seemed to be hundreds of variations. Poisons that attacked nerves or cells or clotted blood, or shut down the immune system. It took years of Sangoma study to get to grips with the antidotes. Martine had a couple of hours at most to find one for Claudius. Meanwhile, his hands, feet, and face were swelling to elephantine proportions. Grace had told her on that day she stopped the bus that when the time came she would know what to do, but Martine didn't. She didn't have the faintest idea. She concentrated harder. Soon she began to feel lightheaded and peculiar. The scene at the beach swam away, and she saw smoke and Africans in animal masks, and then out of nowhere, a mental picture of Grace's plant sitting in the blue mineral water bottle in her cabin on Sea Kestrel came into her head. The beach scene, with its deathly still patient and circle of frightened faces, came rushing back to Martine. "Is there another name for a man of war?" she asked. They stared at her blankly. "Or please think, does it have another name? Do they call it anything else?" A blue bottle," Jake answered. "Some people call it a blue bottle." "The leaves," she said to Ben. "We need Grace's leaves." He was gone before she had finished the sentence. I'm just going to keep going on chapter 19. It's just too exciting to stop here. Martine sat with her knees scrunched up, watching Claudius's chest rise and fall. For months she thought him one of the most arrogant, unpleasant boys she had ever had the misfortune of meeting. Now as day broke, muted and grey across a motionless sea, all she could think was how good it would make her feel if he woke up. Little by little, Martine realized the island was changing them. The evening before, Lucy, who'd never previously exhibited the slightest interest in anything other than fashion accessories, shopping, and herself, had worked as hard as the boys to construct a shelter to protect Claudius from the elements. And then she had insisted on taking the first shift to watch over him, sitting up all night long before waking Martine shortly before dawn. Now she was asleep, spread-eagled on the sand, snoring faintly. Even Sherilyn had pulled herself together enough to help gather firewood in the creepy-crawly haunted darkness. But the biggest change was in Nathan, who was a city boy through and through and had always gone out of his way to avoid contact with wild beasts in the outdoors. At school he was obsessively neat and had never been known to have a wrinkle or stain on his uniform. And yet he had volunteered to rise when it was still dark and go with Ben to try to catch fish without a hook or line. An embarrassed Jake had confessed to losing Martine's fishing equipment the first time he used it. He and his friends had eaten nothing but coconut for days, so Ben and Nathan were going to try an old islander's trick to get some. One of the Mozambican sailors on the ship had told Ben that in the absence of line, island fishermen would sometimes crush the leaves of the lula palm, spoon the juicy mixture into a rock pool, and wait for the fish to become intoxicated. Meanwhile, they would block the fish's exit to deeper water. When the fish were rolling drunk, the men would simply scoop them into a net, using sand to protect their hands from the spiky gills. Since they weren't sure which of any of the species of palms that grew in groves on the island were lula palms, the boys were going to take sample fronds from each and hope that the lula was among them. "We don't have a net," Ben said with a sly sideways glance at his assistant, "but Nathan has already offered to give up his shirt." Nathan's squawks of protest could be heard halfway down the beach. Martine waved them off and returned to her unconscious patient. It had been a traumatic night. Ben had taken over an hour to find Grace's plant because he'd been up at the lighthouse when she planted it at the lake, and he'd had great difficulty locating it by torchlight. By the time he reappeared with the leaves, Martine had got cold feet about squeezing their milky sap directly onto the wheels on Claudius's stomach and legs. Then again, doing nothing could be disastrous. It was Nathan who eventually convinced her to take a chance on the leaves by suggesting the group make a pact. They would each put a hand on Martine while she was administering the sap, so they all shared responsibility for the outcome. So that's what they did. To begin with, the outcome had been as bad as it could possibly be. The wheels on Claudius's skin had turned a horrendous color in the firelight, and he had writhed and moaned in his unconscious state. Martine was quite sure she'd killed him, but after 10 minutes or so, the high color faded and the wheels had slowly begun to shrink. Over the next couple of hours, the swelling around his neck and face went down and his breathing became more regular. But he had remained unconscious throughout the night. Now Martine was alone with him. Lucy and Sherilyn had managed to sleep through Ben and Nathan's fishing preparations, and Jake, who was restless, had gone to the lighthouse to bring down anything that looked as though it might be useful until they could move Claudius. They were all trying to put a brave face on, but an air of desperation had hung over the group the previous evening. Just want to look back. So looks like it's helping Grace's plant. Nobody wanted to say out loud that they'd been on the island for coming up to 5 days and they'd not seen so much as a glimmer of a search party, tourist, or fisherman. And with Claudius at death's door, Martine and Ben had decided that it wasn't a good time to mention undersea mines and spear gun-carrying divers at the wreck. Martine wondered what was going to become of them. They were all so certain they were going to be rescued. But what if they weren't? What if the men on the dhow came ashore first? What if Claudius never came out of his coma? It seemed to her that there were a lot of what-ifs on the island, and none of them were pleasant. All at once, Claudius's eyes flew open as if he'd been startled awake. He stared around in bewilderment. "Mum," he blurted out, "Mum." "Claudius, it's me, Martine. You're still on the island." Claudius took in the reed shelter and the white sand and palm trees visible through the entrance and took a ragged breath. In a strange, raspy voice, he mumbled almost to himself, "It looked so pretty in the water. I was swimming and I tried to catch it. It was like touching fire. Only I couldn't get away from it. I was all tangled up in it. I felt as if I was being burnt alive. I was screaming at Jake because he was too scared to take it off me. And then I couldn't find my legs anymore." "It's okay," Martine said, shaken. "It's okay. You've had an allergic reaction to a Portuguese man-o-war sting, but you're safe now. You're going to be all right." She tried a smile, and even that was an odd sensation, because Claudius was not someone she'd ever imagined smiling at. "Would you like some water?" He nodded, and she held a gourd to his lips, and with some difficulty supported him as he drank. He lay back down again, facing the wall of the shelter, and was quiet for a long time. Martine thought he'd gone back to sleep, and she dozed a little herself. She was awoken by a horse. "Why?" "Why what?" Martine asked sleepily, although she already knew what he meant. Claudius rolled over. His cheeks were sunken and his skin tinged with yellow. "Why did you do it? Why did you help me after all the things I've done to you and Ben?" There was no easy answer, so Martine just said, "You were very ill. Anyway, it wasn't really me who helped you. It was Grace. She's a traditional healer. She gave me the plant which cured you." "Well, she shouldn't have," Claudius burst out, his voice strained and unsteady. "You shouldn't have. I don't deserve to be cured. I wish the dolphins had never saved me. I wish I was dead. You saw what I did to Ben on the ship. I'm a coward." Martine had spent a lot of hours thinking much the same thing, but when Claudia said it himself, she saw that Ben was right. He deserved pity, not contempt. She shook her head. "We've already forgotten about that. It was a lie, but if ever a lie could be justified, it was now. Everybody does silly things when they're frightened," she consoled him. "Anyway, you're not a coward. You were the least scared person on the sea kestrel at the start of the storm. I heard you telling Luke you were going to stay below deck and watch a film while everyone else was panicking up above. And you helped your father sail your yacht through the hurricane in the Cayman Islands. That takes real guts," Claudia said brokenly. "It isn't true about the yacht, you know." "What isn't true? You mean you don't really have a yacht?" "Yeah, we have a yacht. And not just any yacht. We have a yacht which once belonged to one of the richest men in Greece. No, I mean, it's not true about the hurricane or about my father asking me to take the wheel. My dad doesn't know one end of a yacht from another, and even if he did, I'm the last person he would trust with it. I did see a hurricane when I was in the Cayman Islands, but it was on the news in our hotel room. Our windows were lashed by wind and rain, and the palm trees were bending double, but we were never in any danger. The eye of the hurricane never came within 50 miles of us. A father and son came on the television and talked about how they'd battled the storm in their little boat. And the father was so proud of his son's heroism, I decided to pretend that their story was mine." He looked away. "I spend a lot of time watching TV in hotel rooms when my mum and dad are out at cocktail parties with their rich and famous friends. Those kind of people don't like kids around, especially fat ones. Martine pictured her own life at Sawubona. The campfire breakfast with Tendai, where he would talk to her about bushcraft and Zulu legends. The newly cut grass scent of Jemmy and the feel of his whiskers when he nuzzled her. The homely evenings with her grandmother when they'd celebrate the successful rehabilitation of a sanctuary orphan with a special African dinner. She realized then how fortunate she was. Yes, she'd lost her parents, but they'd given her more love than many people had from families who were with them for a lifetime. And her grandmother constantly showed Martine that she cared with actions, even if she couldn't always do it with words. Is that why you're not very nice to us? She asked Claudius. Because you're unhappy. Is that why I bully you mean? You can say it. No, I give you a hard time because you're the opposite of me, because I envy you. Because your life seems so simple, because you don't seem to want or need anything apart from your white giraffe and your friends at Sawubona. Because even though Ben doesn't speak, it's obvious that you're there for each other. You care for each other. Martine was stunned. Look, she said, my life might seem perfect to you, but you wouldn't believe how many people I've managed to upset or disappoint over the past few weeks. I've even hurt Ben, the nicest person I've ever met. But earlier this year, when the white giraffe was stolen because of something dumb I did, somebody told me it's never too late to fix things. Claudius gave a tired laugh. I'm not sure about that. Anyway, now that you know the truth about me, you can take your revenge. Go on, tell everyone what a loser I am. Nathan's dark head came round the door of the shelter. He thrust forward a bamboo pole with 5 fat fish speared on it. Ta-da! He trumpeted. His eyes widened when he saw that Claudius was conscious. Is everything okay in here? We heard voices. Everything's fantastic, Martine assured him. Claudius has just woken up. He was wondering if anyone has had a chance to go to McDonald's yet. If not, he says some coconut milk and a fish barbecue breakfast would be perfect. Wow. 2 fantastic chapters. The next one, chapter 20. Just wondering where they're going to. I mean, they just come through such difficult situations. And they've learned so much about each other. And actually, like a near tragedy, like Claudius nearly dying, has actually brought them together again. And sometimes, like the worst things bring us together. Anyway, that was 2 great chapters, and I enjoyed sharing it with you.